Let's be clear about what just happened. This isn't a simple supply chain hiccup, like waiting an extra week for a package. This is a full-scale, strategic freeze. The news that rippled through the aerospace world wasn't a delay, it was a total stop. China, a customer that was projected to buy a quarter of the world's new airplanes over the next 2 decades, has effectively pressed the giant, red pause button on all Boeing orders. Why does this hurt so much? Think of an airplane company's order book not just as a list of future sales, but as its life support system. It's the blood that keeps the entire corporate body alive. An active order book is what allows Boeing to plan its production years out, invest billions in new technology, and keep its vast, intricate supply chain, from titanium suppliers to small fastener makers, running smoothly. When that book freezes, the entire corporate engine immediately starts to seize up. The real damage here is far deeper than the immediate lost revenue. The subtle, most dangerous effect is the long-term signal this sends to the global market. It tells every single airline, from Jakarta to Johannesburg, that aligning with a U.S. industrial giant like Boeing now carries a dangerous new kind of geopolitical risk. This single move by Beijing didn't just hurt Boeing's bank account, it strategically undermined its global reputation as a safe, reliable, and politically neutral investment. This sets the stage for the rest of the conflict. Now, you might be thinking, couldn't a giant like Boeing just absorb this hit? After all, it's a massive, multi-billion-dollar company. The answer is a resounding no, and the reason reveals a critical vulnerability. Boeing was the perfect target for this kind of economic strike precisely because it was already fighting a war on multiple fronts. Look at the timing. As China was making its strategic decision, Boeing's defense division, a massive operation vital for United States national security, was paralyzed by a major strike, halting work on critical, expensive programs. Simultaneously, the company had to announce another delay for its flagship, next-generation 777X jet. These aren't just isolated problems. This is a classic textbook sign of deep-seated operational and managerial issues. It signals a lack of smooth control across the entire company. For China, this was a golden opportunity. By targeting a company that was already visibly weakened and struggling with internal chaos, they maximized the impact of their retaliation. They weren't just showing strength, they were showing precision. They demonstrated to the world that the powerful U.S. industrial base has soft spots, and they know exactly where to hit them. The lesson here for any nation watching is profound. In a modern economic conflict, you don't need to match your rival's strength blow for blow. You just need to accurately identify and exploit their points of greatest weakness. Boeing's internal struggles made it that very weak point. So, what started this entire dangerous chain reaction? It was a decision made in Washington to impose tariffs as high as 145% on key Chinese industrial goods. On the surface, the logic seems simple, tough, and appealing. Make foreign products drastically more expensive to protect American jobs and domestic industries. It's a classic move that often sounds good in a headline. But here is where the strategy falls apart, revealing a critical, modern economic reality. In a deeply globalized economy, these taxes are less of a protective shield and more of a boomerang. When you make it prohibitively expensive for a nation like China to sell its goods to you, they don't just surrender or sit idle, they are forced to immediately take 3 actions. So, China is innovating to create products that can overcome the tariff cost. They're also working to diversify and find new customers, and, most importantly, they're being compelled to build their own supply chains and foster their own industrial champions. The 145% tariff wasn't really a knockout punch meant to crush the Chinese economy. Instead, it was, an incredibly loud wake-up call. It aggressively accelerated China's existing push for self-reliance. And, instead of keeping American industry safe, this move is actually funding and accelerating the creation of its most powerful long-term competitors. It taught them they can't rely on the United States market, and so they must quickly build a world where they just don't need to. China's response to these high tariffs wasn't a simple, emotional tit-for-tat tax war, it was a masterclass in strategic thinking. Instead of just making it harder for the United States to sell products in China, they started building a whole new playing field where the United States dollar and American companies are no longer the central focus. This is the real power of their counterpunch. It's about long-term, fundamental change. They began aggressively reorienting their massive economy. We are seeing billion-dollar contracts for aircraft technology, oil, and infrastructure that would have once gone to American firms now being systematically funneled toward partners within the BRICS alliance. Nations like Russia, Brazil, India, and South Africa. This isn't just random retaliation, It's a fundamental restructuring of global trade routes. The goal is profound, to build an economic ecosystem so robust, so self-sufficient, that U.S. tariffs eventually become completely irrelevant. For America, this is a far more dangerous outcome than a simple tariff battle, because it means losing influence over the very structure of the global economy. They are essentially teaching the world how to survive and even thrive without you. So, who is the direct beneficiary when Boeing is strategically forced out of the world's fastest-growing aviation market? Enter COMAC and its C919 jet. For years, many in the West dismissed COMAC as a wannabe, a state-funded project that could never truly compete with the giants of the aerospace industry. But that perception is now honestly dangerously outdated. The C919 is, well, a capable and modern single-aisle jet designed specifically to rival Boeing's 737 and the Airbus A320. The trade war and the Boeing freeze have handed COMAC something priceless, a protected, massive home market. With Chinese airlines needing thousands of new planes and being actively encouraged to, buy Chinese, COMAC has a guaranteed order book. This is a classic recipe for creating a global champion. The assurance of massive domestic demand allows them to scale up production, refine their technology, and honestly, aggressively drive down costs. They are no longer just trying to build a plane. They are building an entire industrial ecosystem around it, supported by the state and the U. In this high-stakes fight between the United States and China, there's a clear, quiet winner emerging: Europe's Airbus. Think of Airbus as the neutral party in a messy divorce. They are positioned perfectly to benefit from Boeing's misfortune without directly confronting China's rising COMAC. Here is how they are executing a remarkably smart, long-term strategy. First, as Chinese airlines look for alternatives to the now politically risky Boeing, Airbus is honestly the most logical, ready-now substitute. They have been aggressively securing massive orders from China, effectively taking over market share that Boeing once considered pretty secure. Second, in other parts of the world, airlines that are, wary of betting on an unproven COMAC jet are also turning to Airbus as the safe, established choice. But Airbus's strategy is even smarter than just picking up spare business. They are making long-term plays to cement their position. This includes, potentially increasing production of parts within China itself, which creates local jobs and deepens their political goodwill. They are not just selling planes to China, they are integrating themselves into China's industrial ecosystem. This makes them an invaluable partner, not just a foreign supplier, and effectively insulates them from the kind of political freeze that hit Boeing. The result is that Airbus is capturing customers on both ends of the geopolitical conflict, allowing them to strengthen their global position while their main rival is caught in the crossfire. The story doesn't end with China, Boeing, and COMAC. That's just one piece of a much larger global puzzle. What we are really seeing is the activation of the BRICS economic alliance as a powerful, self-sufficient bloc. This is no longer just a political talking point or a meeting of world leaders, it's becoming a concrete economic reality. So, think of BRICS as building a new members-only club for global trade. Inside this club, they really don't need to follow the old rules set by the West. Countries like Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil are bringing the vital raw materials, the huge consumer markets, and, the investment capital. China steps in with the manufacturing muscle and products, like the COMAC C919. Together, they're creating a closed-loop system, their own supply chains, their own financial systems for deals, and even their own aviation standards. This whole system runs on a totally different engine. What we're seeing is a major push for more trade in local currencies, intentionally bypassing the US dollar. For aviation, this is a game-changer. An airline in Ethiopia or Indonesia can now get financing from a BRICS development bank to buy COMAC jets, paid for in Chinese yuan or another local currency. This creates a supply chain, from financing and manufacturing to the end customer, that operates almost entirely outside the traditional Western-dominated financial system. This holistic plan for economic independence gives COMAC a guaranteed runway to success. It doesn't need to beat Boeing in America, it just needs to dominate this new, vast economic playground being built entirely outside of Western influence. So, is America's tough trade strategy working? The evidence we have just explored suggests it is achieving the exact opposite of its intention. The goal was to assert dominance and protect you. But the result has been to push other major economies to unite and build an alternative system where America's influence is dramatically reduced. This is the core of the gamble. For decades, U.S. power was rooted in a global system that relied on the dollar and American technology. By using tariffs as a primary weapon, the United States has shown the world that this system can be, weaponized against them. In response, they are simply building a new one. The real cost isn't the temporary tax revenue from tariffs, it's actually the permanent erosion of American economic leadership. The United States is teaching its competitors a vital lesson. The only way to be safe from American economic pressure is to honestly stop relying on America altogether. And that lesson is reshaping the global order right before our eyes. What happens to Boeing never just stays with Boeing. This isn't just about one company's struggle, it's a potential blueprint for what could happen to other cornerstone American industries. Think about semiconductors, electric vehicles, or pharmaceuticals, sectors where the US has long been a leader. The Boeing situation shows us how quickly a leading position can erode when a company gets caught between internal weaknesses and external political pressure. It serves as a stark warning. If other U.S. industrial giants don't strengthen their foundations, and if trade policy continues to fracture global markets, we could see this exact story repeat itself across multiple sectors. The result wouldn't just be corporate losses, but a fundamental weakening of America's economic security. So, where does all this leave us? We are moving decisively away from the era of one single global economy. The dream of a completely interconnected world is fading, replaced by a new, more fragmented reality. We are seeing the world split into two major competing economic blocs. This isn't a Cold War in the old sense, but it is a great economic decoupling. For businesses, it means navigating two different sets of rules. For nations, it means choosing sides. And for us, it means understanding that this new world order isn't coming in the future, it's already here.